to him. Now, the real race that we're interested in is the race for governor, and we are now just about 24 and a half hours away from the polls opening in Michigan. Joined this morning here in the studio by Joe DiSano, a partner in Main Street Strategies. And your web show is called what?
TwoGuysNamedJoe.net.
TwoGuysNamedJoe.net. How do you see it all unfolding tomorrow? Let's start on the Democratic side.
Well, on the Democratic side, I see Verge Bonero opening up a double-digit lead on Andy Dillon over the weekend. I've done a significant amount of voter identification, and I've got Andy Dillon losing in Detroit, Western Wayne, tied in Macomb, opening up a lead. Bonero's opening up a lead in Oakland County. And then in the outer regions of the state, I see Bonero racking up huge numbers.
What's voter identification?
Essentially calling someone and asking them who they're going to vote for.
Like polling?
Well, it's not as scientific.
Mm-hmm.
At this point in the game, it's more about just identifying voters so that you can turn them out.
One would think those are Andy Dillon strongholds, though. You said Western Wayne?
Western Wayne. I mean, he's going to win his House district, but I suspect that's about it.
Why?
I think a couple of things. One, it's a Democratic primary. Andy Dillon is anti-choice, anti-stem cell. He's, shut down companies and been a corporate raider. And I think in this economy, people don't respond to that very well.
House Speaker Andy Dillon, candidate for governor, is on the other end of our line this morning in the last 24 and a half hours before the polls will open. Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Morning, Michael Patrick. How are you today?
Good. You have said that you are the candidate who can actually unite the parties and get people moving forward. Why do you think that, and how would you do it?
Well, I've done it before, whether it be working on 21st Century Jobs Fund or energy reform or getting pension reform done. We've built coalitions and got support for tough things to get done, and that's what the state's going to have to do. There's going to be some tough decisions that have to be made, and we need someone that can bring both sides together to get it done.
Your television ads say that Lansing Mayor Verge Bonero has too many backers from special interest groups to make him an effective leader. Why do you say that?
Well, if you look at when the Free Press reported on Saturday that the Verge for governor campaign has spent $0 on TV ads, but then the Genesee County Dems have spent about $2 million to ruin my reputation and to attack me. Who's paying for those? I mean, I know about at least 3 groups that are paying for those ads, but he's going to be beholden to those people that are nervous about Andy Dillon because I will change things. I'm willing to reform the way government does business, and those folks that are opposed to the reform and they want the status quo have basically paid for it, and maybe will buy his election.
You know what's intriguing to me, and that is that we get a lot of talk in the closing days here, it seems like, about the process. Who's buying campaign commercials and who's, is it negative and that kind of thing. Do you get the sense that the voters and the primary voters really sort of expect that? After all, it's an election. So let's not quibble about these things and let's get our message out. Do you get that sense that nobody really wants to hear about the process? They just want to hear about leadership?
Well, I think whenever a candidate talks about process in the days leading up to an election, that usually means they're losing.
Well, it's like complaining to the referee, isn't it, Speaker Dillon?
I don't know. I think the voters want to know, who's paying for,
who's paying for Advanced Michigan?
Disclosure laws and
who's paying for the Northern Michigan Education Fund?
What's that, Joe?
Well, he's got his own special interest. For him to come on here and claim that Verge Bonero has a lock on special interests is ludicrous. I mean, he's got Advanced Michigan, which is moving corporate money into this race. He's got the Northern Michigan Education Fund that hasn't even filed with the Secretary of State, completely illegally moving money into the race. I mean, this is absurd.
Speaker, are these fair claims?
I think there's a great deal of difference. I mean, I don't control those or have those. We know, what money.
And Verge Bonero doesn't control any of the groups supporting him. That's just not true, Mr. Speaker.
Well, it's been reported that it's very clear the MEA has been putting a lot of money in it. Mark Gaffney has clearly demonstrated that they're putting money in there. Manny Maroon is putting money in there. So we know, who's
who's putting money into Advanced Michigan? Now's your chance to come clean. Who's putting money in Advanced Michigan? Tell the voters now. Tell voters across the state of Michigan.
I don't control those entities. I don't know.
And Verge Bonero doesn't control the Genesee County Democratic Party.
I agree that he doesn't.
Now, you spent Sunday visiting churches, and I presume you talked to lots of people. What is the overriding sort of concern that they have when they speak with you? What do they want to know about?
people are very worried about jobs. You know, we've got to get the state's economy turned around, and that's the number one issue. It always has been in this election.
Jobs. How will you spend the last 24 hours?
We'll be campaigning in Detroit this morning, and then we'll go down to Monroe, and then we'll end up the day in my hometown.
Any last-minute message that you want people who are hearing about you for the first time, maybe some of those undecided voters in places like Ludington and Manistee and Traverse City and Petoskey who are finally starting to pay attention because they're inside 24 hours, what message would you want them to take away when they think of Andy Dillon?
You know, this is a tough time in Michigan's history. We need a different kind of leader, someone that has my type of background. I have 20 years in the private sector, 10 working directly with or for troubled businesses, but also 5 years of experience now in Lansing, and I'll be ready to hit the ground running. I'm not afraid to take on the tough fights, and I've demonstrated I can work in a bipartisan way.
Okay, travel safely. Good luck tomorrow, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Michael.
You bet. The Democrat from Redford, House Speaker Andy Dillon, who is right now in the race of his lifetime against Lansing Mayor Verge Bernero. By all accounts, the most recent polls show that Mayor Bernero is leading Joe DiSano. Let's speak about the success of the Bernero campaign, because people sort of snickered, didn't they, when he got in the race?
People snickered, but I personally don't find it very surprising. I mean, here's the fact of the matter. Democrats in a Democratic primary are going to vote for a Democrat. That's not a surprise. Andy Dillon's record and his political stances and his actions as Speaker of the House, frankly, he's not a Democrat. Mm-hmm. He's a Democrat by convenience because he comes from a district where you have to be a Democrat to get elected. And now he's found himself running for governor, and he's being a very sore loser that people are calling him out on his record. Shocking that would happen.
Who do you think is more electable in the general? That's the question. Sometimes, isn't it, that primary voters have to ask? I
think they have. I think voters are ready for a Verge Bernero populist candidacy. They're not willing to turn it over. Let me say this. The same people who said Verge Bernero can't win a general election are the same people who said he can't win this primary. I mean, just last Friday, there was a poll of insiders here in Lansing that 67% of them thought that Andy Dillon was going to win this nomination, and he just isn't. Mm-hmm. The insiders don't know anything. Go out and talk to voters. People are hurting.
They must like his energy. They said that Verge Bernero, nobody knew him outside Lansing when he decided to run.
Absolutely.
They know him now, don't they?
They sure do. On December 4th, I met with him about this campaign, and it was a joke at the table, you know. And he's been able to turn this into a populist crusade, talking about how we're going to improve the working people's lives of the state, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. And Andy Dillon he's one of these guys who thinks he's above politics, and then when the political campaign breaks out, he cries. It's really quite laughable. If you're not tough enough to stand up to Verge Bernero, how are you going to be tough enough to create jobs?
Well, there is something distasteful about the whole process of not only governing but campaigning too, isn't there?
It's brass knuckles free for all. That's just the reality. I mean,
and a lot of showbiz.
And a lot. I've always said it's like professional wrestling. There's no difference.
Well, that's what they said for years now about Speaker Dillon, that he was too cerebral a gentleman to get down there in the trenches.
I wouldn't say cerebral. I just think he's ineffective. I mean, he on this air, he cited his 5 years in Lansing, which have been a colossal disaster by the most fair assessment. I mean, 2 government shutdowns, you can't handle your basic constitutional duties?
He's Joe DiSano, partner, Main Street Strategies. His webcast is called Two Guys Named Joe.
Yep, you can hear us at twoguysnamedjoe.net.
All right, we'll talk again as we get closer and closer to the primary and have analysis afterwards, too. It's 35 after the hour.